Imagine a place where vows of chastity were broken in the shadows, where secret rituals took place behind closed doors, and where any attempt to reveal the truth was brutally punished. This is not fiction. This happened inside the convent of San Ambrose, one of the most scandalous in the history of the church. There, the spiritual leader maintained a clandestine relationship with a priest, organized ceremonies disguised as sacred rituals, and severely punished any nun who dared to question her authority. But this was not an isolated case. The truth is that for centuries, convents were the scene of hypocrisy, abuse, and shocking transgressions that the church tried to keep secret. Today, we will reveal the darkest mysteries hidden behind the walls of these institutions and explore the stories that few dared to tell. Get ready, because after watching this video, you will never look at convents the same way again. Throughout the Middle Ages, and even in the centuries that followed, many women did not enter convents out of vocation. Daughters of nobles and commoners were forced to become nuns for reasons unrelated to their faith, unwanted marriages. For many families, sending a daughter to a convent was cheaper than paying a dowry to marry her off. Social control. Women considered rebellious or problematic were forcibly cloistered. Economic pressure. Some families simply could not afford another member and saw the convents as a convenient solution. But once inside these sacred walls, there was no escape. The church imposed a rigid system where disobedience was punished with confinement, humiliation, and even physical violence. Escape was nearly impossible, and for many, trying meant death. Of all the convents that hid dark secrets, the convent of San Ambrose in Rome stood out as one of the most infamous. In the 19th century, the German princess Catherine von Hohenzollern-Sigmaringen entered the institution and quickly realized that something was wrong. The practices inside the monastery challenged any notion of sanctity. Secret rituals where nuns were encouraged to break their vows of chastity, use of hallucinogenic substances to simulate spiritual experiences, psychological manipulation, and absolute control by the abbess, Maria Luisa. The leader of the convent herself had a secret affair with a priest who visited the institution under the pretext of performing religious ceremonies. But the real shock came when Catherine managed to escape and take the case directly to the Vatican. The church, faced with the scandal, hushed up the story, keeping the punishment secret and protecting its reputation at all costs. But how many other convents hid similar practices? The routine inside the convents was marked by endless prayers. They began before sunrise and lasted until late at night. Exhausting work. Nuns were forced to work in plantations, do cleaning and do manual labor, extreme hunger and fasting. Food was minimal, and many became ill from malnutrition. Precarious conditions. They slept on hard wooden beds without adequate blankets, even in the intense cold. But the worst was the cruel punishment system. Physical punishments were applied to those who broke the rules or tried to challenge the authority of the convent. Nuns were beaten, locked in solitary confinement, and, in extreme cases, disappeared without explanation. Despite the strict rules, human nature cannot be suppressed, and many nuns found ingenious ways to break their vow of chastity. Nocturnal rituals. Some abbesses organized secret meetings within the convent. Disguised escapes. During religious events, some nuns would escape to spend the night outside the convent. Hidden messages. Small notes were exchanged between nuns and monks from neighboring monasteries. In some convents, these meetings became a common practice, to the point where secret births were carried out within the institutions. But what happened? To these children, some were sent for adoption in secret. Others were sacrificed to cover up the scandal. There are reports of mass graves inside convents, where babies were buried without identification. If the repression within the convents was already brutal, the 20th century brought a new form of horror, the Magdalene laundries. in Ireland. These religious institutions functioned as prisons for women considered undesirable. Between 1922 and 1996, more than 10,000 women were sent to these places, many of them for absurd reasons. Being a single mother, having been a victim of abuse. In the 1990s, mass graves were discovered on the grounds of these institutions, revealing that many of these women never made it out alive. The controversial practices within the convents were not isolated cases. Stories of nuns who were abused by priests came to light, but were ignored for decades. Nuns who tried to speak out were silenced, discredited, and in many cases expelled from the church without explanation. But now the secrets are being revealed. The big question is, how many other scandals still remain hidden? How many stories were buried to protect the church's reputation? For centuries, convents were portrayed as places of holiness and devotion. But behind their walls, dark secrets were kept under lock and key. The hypocrisy of the church, which condemned so-called sinners from the outside world, hid within its own walls abuse, manipulation, and shocking transgressions. Now the truth is coming out. If you believe these stories need to be known, leave a comment saying, "The truth must come out."